believe, for instance, that there is a diplomatic path forward, that particularly up near Lebanon. And we still believe that while it is increasingly difficult, and we are certainly no closer to finality, that we believe a ceasefire deal and a negotiation to get the hostages out is still the best outcome, and we're going to keep pursuing that.
But how do these events move forward any diplomatic solution here?
It's difficult for me to stand up here, Gabe, and tell you exactly how incidents over the last couple of days are going to affect outcomes in the next few days. All I can tell you is we're still putting our shoulder to the wheel to get the hostages home and get a ceasefire in place, as daunting as that is today. And we are still involved in intensive diplomacy to try to prevent a second front from opening up on that border with Lebanon.
Thank you. Given the rhetoric and the attacks in the last few days, it seems like a full-out conflict is inevitable at this point. Would you agree with that assessment? And is the U.S. government preparing for an evacuation of American citizens in Lebanon and or in Israel in that case?
I think we've learned through experience, particularly over now what's going on almost a year here, that nothing is inevitable when it comes to that particular part of the world and this particular conflict. And we're going to, as I said to Gabe, we're going to do everything we can to see if we can end it and get those hostages home. And your second question was evacuation. I don't have anything with respect to evacuation preparations to talk about. I mean, that's a better question really put to the State Department. I think you know, Laura, particularly from covering the Pentagon, we have on the shelf, we have evacuation plans available for places all over the world. But I wouldn't lead that to believe that we're in a moment now where we think we need to imminently call for that or act on that right now.
What has been the impact of the latest attacks on the potential for a ceasefire deal in Gaza?
I think it's too soon to know if what happened over the last couple of days is going to have any effect on where we are with a ceasefire deal. Sadly, we aren't any closer to that now than we were even a week ago. So it's difficult to see any immediate impact of these incidents, but I think it's just too soon to know in general.
Officials have said we're 90% there. Is that still the case?
I think in terms of the agreed framework and the language, that's still the case. The framework has been agreed to. The major architecture of the deal had been agreed to by both sides. But as we said, once you get down to niddling over that last 10%, and you're in that kind of horse trading, it gets real hard, and the details get real specific, and that's where we have run into some resistance, and we're not any closer today than we were a few days ago.
Thanks. CBS News, at least, has learned that the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, spoke yesterday with the Israeli Defense Minister 2 different times. We've been told no specifics were given about the operation that happened yesterday. Was there any heads up given yesterday that there would be more attacks in Lebanon today?
Well, I'd refer you to the Defense Department to speak to conversations that the Secretary had with Minister Gallant. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement in either of these incidents, and I have nothing.
One thing, though, but awareness it was coming is another.
I recognize the question. I have nothing more to add.
If you're someone who owns a pager like this that's been blown up in Lebanon in recent days, whether it was made by the Taiwanese company or the Hungarian company that may have had a licensing deal with them, should you be concerned it could blow up?
Again, Ed, I have nothing more to add on this.
Yeah. Our sources have confirmed to us it's been widely reported that Israel is responsible for this, but notably you still won't say that. Why is that? Is it because that's not your assessment or because you don't support what they're doing here?
It's because I don't have anything more to add on this issue. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement, and I'm not going to go beyond that today.
Then let me ask this. These kinds of tactics, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies, is this type of warfare acceptable to the United States?
Again, Mary, I appreciate the question. I'm simply not going to be able to address these incidents over the last couple of days in any level of detail one way or another.
Okay, let me try one other thing.
Please.
Everyone keeps urging, all parties involved not to escalate this. Isn't this an escalation already? I mean, isn't this Israel doing exactly what you've been warning them not to do?
Again, I'm not going to speak to the details of these incidents. I understand that's frustrating. I get it. And I understand where all your questions are coming from. They're all valid. They're all fair. I'm just not going to get into this. I will add, if I could, and restate a little bit to what I said to Gabe. We still don't want to see an escalation of any kind. We don't believe that the way to solve where we're at in this crisis is by additional military operations at all. We still believe that the best way to prevent escalation, to prevent another front from opening up in Lebanon, is through diplomacy, which is why Mr. Hochstein was over in the region this week. And we're still going to pursue those kinds of outcomes.
If a state actor was involved in any way in what took place in Lebanon, is that acceptable behavior by a government?
Look, that's a great hypothetical, Trevor, that I'm simply not going to engage.
So it's not that's not the case, that it was a state actor?
I have nothing more to add on these incidents. I understand the question. I'm not going to engage in hypotheticals or speculate about what did or didn't happen or who might be responsible.
Is there any current intelligence assessment as to who was responsible?
I'm not going to get into intelligence estimates and assessments from here either.
Secretary of State Blinken expressed frustration at the escalations and remarks earlier today, saying it threatens to slow it, to stop a ceasefire deal. Is that the White House's assessment as well, that it's close to being stopped or derailed, or?
Look, as I said earlier, I think looking at the last couple of days, it's just a little too soon to know what kind of impact those incidents are going to have in the region writ large, particularly when it comes to the tensions up at the border with Lebanon. On the ceasefire deal and trying to get both sides back to the table, we're still working at that. Nothing's changed. We're still trying to get that done. We understand that even before the incidents of the last couple of days, doing that was real hard, that there wasn't a lot of momentum to be had there or inertia. We recognize that, but we're still working to try to see if we can get that done, because we still believe the best way to get those hostages home is through a negotiated arrangement. On the tensions with Lebanon, again, too soon to know what these incidents are going to mean to the already high tensions between Israel and Hezbollah up at that border, the blue line specifically. All I can tell you is even as recently as a couple of days ago, Amos Hochstein, our envoy, was in the region having discussions to do everything we can from a diplomatic perspective to prevent those tensions from escalating into all-out conflict.
One more just on Wilmington this weekend. Does the president intend to press Prime Minister Modi on human rights abuses while they're talking, one-on-one?
There's not a conversation that he has with foreign leaders where he doesn't talk about the importance of respecting human and civil rights, and that includes with Prime Minister Modi. He did when the Prime Minister was here in the United States, and I'm sure that as appropriate he'll do going forward. I'm not going to get ahead of the conversation, but he never shies away from talking about our concerns over human and civil rights anywhere in the world.
Thanks. And you said a lot of times, especially about this region, that it's very important for this administration that the rules of war or international humanitarian law is being followed. So why won't you make an assessment whether these operations that we're seeing in Lebanon indeed are in accordance with international humanitarian law?
I can appreciate that you all want answers to these questions, and you want them now. I get that. We're talking about incidents that allegedly happened today, apparently happened today, and some that happened yesterday. I'm just not going to get into intelligence assessments one way or another about this. And I would also add that, as we have said from the very beginning, Israel has a right to defend itself. How they do so matters to us, and we don't shy away from having those kinds of conversations with the Israelis as appropriate.
So you're saying Israel is behind these operations?
I did not say that.
Do you think that Israel, whoever committed this attack, is undermining U.S. efforts at avoiding an escalation in the region? And if so, what is the next move to try and prevent that from happening?
We're going to keep at the work of intense diplomacy to see what we can do to de-escalate, to try to prevent this from becoming a bigger conflict than it already has.
One more. Over the weekend, the Palestinian ministry in Gaza submitted a report with the names, IDs, ages of 34,000 people who've been killed since October 7. Over 7,000 more whose identities have not been verified. The first 14 pages of the report are babies under the age of 1, and 2 people over the age of 100. Has the White House seen that report, and do you have any comments beyond far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed in this conflict?
Let me take the question for you so I can get you back a good substantive answer. I don't know if we've seen that report. I haven't, but that doesn't mean that somebody here hasn't. So why don't you let me take that back and get you a better answer?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, there's just so many ways you can ask a question and try and get an answer. You're listening to the press call there, speaking to John Kirby, the White House National Security Communications Advisor. And Kirby says when it comes to the explosions of devices in Lebanon, that the U.S. was not involved in any of the incidents that happened today or yesterday. He insisted that the ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas is the best way to end the war in Gaza. And the journalists there tried to press him on the topic and said that it's just too soon to know if the exploding devices incidents will have any impact on ongoing peace talks or instability in the Middle East at large. We'll continue to listen in to what he does and doesn't say there at the White House, but still to come, Sean Diddy Combs is back in court at this moment today as his lawyers do their best to secure his release. He's charged with sex trafficking and other serious crimes. We're on the scene. We'll bring you developments as they emerge. Stay right where you are. This is CBS News 24/7.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's